Well, joining us on Capitol Hill for our Monday panel, Liberal MP Julian Simmonds and Labor's Kate Thwaites. Thank you to both of you for joining us, and you will have to excuse them if they're sounding a little bit puffed because they've just legged it up here from the chamber where they had a vote. Julian Simmonds, the Omicron variant is, of course, capturing everyone's attention today. It seems like the message at the moment is don't panic. Let's try to figure out what's going on. But when we're in a stage where some states and territories are just on the cusp of opening their borders again, how difficult is it going to be to convince state governments not to continue with that fortress approach they've had?
Yeah, well, look, in different states are at different stages, but I just repeat that message for us not to lose our head. You know, we have shown throughout the pandemic that the federal government and state governments can act quickly. That's why we've managed to keep the death rate low. We've got a much higher vaccination rate now as well. And we've already moved swiftly to put some restrictions in place from those African nations where the variant is prevalent. So let's get the TGA and the Principal Health Committee to get some more information for us as they hoover it up from around the world so that we can understand. While we know it's more transmissible, it's still uncertain about whether or not it's in fact a milder form of the disease.
Do you think we've been left flat-footed here by the fact that we're seeing New South Wales ramping up its hotel quarantine system again, left flat-footed by the fact we haven't got those extra quarantine facilities apart from Howard Springs online yet?
No, I don't think anybody's indicating that there's a shortage of hotel quarantine beds. I mean, quite the opposite, in fact. As you say, most states have transitioned away from that. So the opportunity's there if we want to go back to it. But again, I don't think it helps us if we're taking guesses at this point. Let's get the information right. We bought ourselves a bit of time by putting the restrictions in place from those African nations so that we can really understand whether it is a milder form of the virus.
Kate Thwaites, I want to ask you about this report that we're hearing, or the scientific evidence is that this is partly because we're seeing unvaccinated nations, poorer communities in developing nations who have not yet been vaccinated. We're talking about a booster program here in Australia when some of our closest neighbours haven't even had their first shot. Do you think this would strengthen the argument for, say, the CSL plant in Melbourne? You're, of course, an MP from Melbourne. The CSL plant to continue manufacturing the AstraZeneca shot beyond its scheduled end date to get those suppliers into those communities?
Look, Matt, I think we have a responsibility to do both. So we've got to get boosters out there. I know for my community in Melbourne, we have had such a difficult year, and I understand that people are feeling anxious now hearing these reports. As we just emerge into some semblance of more normal life, people want to know that that's going to be able to continue. So we absolutely need to see from the federal government a plan for booster shots. We know we waited too long for the initial shot, so we have to see that plan. And we have to do our part as a good global citizen to vaccinate the world. We're not safe until the whole world is safe. There will be more variants. We have the capacity to help. We absolutely should do that.
It's very much a wait-and-see approach by both sides.
Well, except we have the plan for the booster. So if you've had your last shot 6 months ago, go and get your booster now. You don't have to wait for that. You can get on with it.
Well, isn't that the advice that after 6 months?
Yeah, after 6 months, absolutely book in for your booster shot right now. That's a way that we can help control, even if there is another variant.
What we still haven't seen, though, is how does that happen? So how do we make sure that vulnerable workers, healthcare workers, those who were originally in the category 1, how do we make sure they're prioritised? And I have already heard reports from people struggling to be able to make that booking for their booster shot. So I think it's really important we learn from the rollout of the initial doses, which was, I think we would all say it was not what we would have liked. So this has to work better. We have to make sure that vulnerable people are targeted, are able to get the shot easily, and that we do put a priority on getting booster shots out there.
Do you want to pick up on one of the other issues today? Julian Simmonds, you were involved in organising a briefing a couple of weeks ago with the Facebook whistleblower Frances Haugen, talking about how harmful social media is, particularly on children. Is this new proposal from the government about trying to unmask trolls, as the Prime Minister describes it, an effective way to tackle that?
Yeah, I think it'll be a fantastic step in the right direction. I mean, what Frances Haugen was talking about as the whistleblower was that Facebook and other tech giants just aren't doing enough. I mean, they're actioning about 4 to 5% of the very hurtful and nasty material that are on their platforms, and that they can do more with the resources they have. And I think this legislation will force them to, because they'll no longer just be able to take a back seat and allow anonymous trolls to defame people. But it's not. When you talk about defamation, I feel like people will think you're talking about politicians. We're talking about people who are trolling young kids into suicide. That's what we have to stop, and we have to help parents protect their kids. And this will allow them to unmask those trolls, to complain to the tech giants, and if they aren't willing to reveal who those anonymous people are so they can take action, then those tech giants will be held responsible for publishing those comments.
Kate Thwaites, we've of course heard about how social media can be a pretty vile place, but there is a broader discussion in the Australian community at the moment about the tenor of debate on all sorts of things, particularly the protests that we've been seeing across the country on pandemic legislation. Is there a chicken and egg argument here? What causes what? Is social media fueling that unruly discourse, or is it the other way around?
Matt, I think people should absolutely be safe online. Children should be safe online. So I look forward to seeing this legislation. We haven't seen it yet. So once we've seen it and understand how it works, that'll be really important. But let's be clear about a lot of the very harmful material that is being spread online at the moment. It is being spread by coalition members. It is being spread by people like Jared Rennick, by George Christensen, who are putting out there vaccine misinformation. And I was just talking to you about how important it is that we have a solid booster program in this country.
That's a really
the
cheap
misinformation that's
shot.
being spread.
When you're talking about protecting kids online,
I'm talking about protecting people from harm. Misinformation
from violent
is genuinely
and extremist
harmful.
material, from people being driven to suicide, to try and make a political point about some statements from other MPs you might not like. It's not in the same category, not even close.
I mean, George Christensen did have to stand up in Parliament last week and say that, you know, he denounced accusations that his post had incited violence and violent threatening behaviour at these protests. Isn't that part of this broader debate that we are tackling?
Well, and the House rightly censured him for it, but, you know, we're going to act in the best interests of kids and to help parents keep their kids safe online. That's what they want. We're not going to play politics with it. And, you know, it would be better for Labor to focus on those protections for everyday Australians than to try and use it to make a political point about George Christensen.
Absolutely, protection for everyday Australians from misinformation that is causing division in our community. And I can tell you again, I've had people walk into my electorate office with information they've got from online that is being spread by government members.
But
and they have been very...
troll. He's got his name to it. We're talking about dealing with
it's
anonymous
still very
trolls,
harmful,
right? So
Julian.
it's not even...
You've just told me it's not harmful, so it is harmful. My staff have been worried by that. I know community members in my community are worried about that.
So
there is a genuine debate.
Labor's more interested in tackling George Christensen than they are tackling anonymous online trolls.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it doesn't tackle a very important issue. That is a genuine issue in our community.
The most important issue for you guys is tackling George Christensen's Facebook page,
Thank you for putting words in my mouth, but thank you, Julian.
On that note, let's tackle one more issue before we run out of time. Julian Simmonds, your backbench colleague Bridget Archer, made quite a stand last week. She crossed the floor, wanting a debate on a National Integrity Commission. Are others going to follow? Would you follow?
Well, look, I want a National Anti-Corruption Commission, as does our side of politics, but we just want to make sure we get it right. I mean, I come from a Queensland perspective where we have a lot of trouble with the CCC. They've destroyed people's lives, their livelihoods, they've lost marriages and families and jobs, and led to no prosecutions at all. So in New South Wales, we've got the example of them being more interested in somebody's relationship than real corruption. So we just have to get the model right, that's all, and we want to make sure that we do get it right.
But that is, you're hinting at the Gladys Berejiklian example the Prime Minister pointed out there. The investigation is looking at whether or not her relationship influenced her decisions, not the relationship itself.
Some of these public inquiries, they just turn into like a reality TV show where people are following along the live feed to see how often they got together and what their relationship was like. I mean, that's not getting to the heart of corruption, which we absolutely need to. But, you know, in Queensland, the CCC, they have a different model. They don't have public hearings, but we've still seen outcomes where people's lives have been destroyed and no prosecutions have been achieved. So getting this right is too important for the nation for us to try and rush it, particularly during a pandemic.
Kate Thwaites, the issue of public hearings is quite central to the criticism that Labor lobs at the coalition over their model. Why is it so important to have public hearings in your view?
Firstly, I'd say, Matt, the coalition has had 3 years to get this right. So this is a bit of a furphy. 3 years, we still don't have the legislation in front of us. You can do two things at once. So we haven't seen the legislation. They're not serious about it. Labor is absolutely serious about a genuine National Anti-Corruption Commission. And I know that people in my community, they talk to me about this a lot, and they talk to me about the lack of trust and faith in our politics. And if we're not prepared to put our hands up and say we will have a genuine body that is accessible and transparent, and that includes sometimes holding public hearings. It won't include that all the time, and in fact, all of the models, I think, in every state don't include holding public hearings all of the time, but they do include them sometimes, and that is important for transparency and accountability. At the moment in this country, we do not have a federal anti-corruption commission, and it does undermine trust in the work that we do in this place. It undermines trust in our ability to govern on behalf of the entire country. And, you know, to say that they just haven't got the details right, again, I say it's been 3 years. Bring the legislation forward.
Well,
Scott Morrison's own MPs are saying it should be brought forward, and Bridget Archer did do a very, I think, brave thing when she spoke up last week and said this should absolutely be being debated by the House, and it should. It's one of the most important things we should be doing.
If you're keen to support it, then we'd
bring
be
it
keen to
on.
bring
You
it on.
haven't brought it on.
Well, let's
Bring
see
it
how
on.
that one plays out during the week. Kate Thwaites, Julian Simmonds, thank you for joining us. Let's let you get to question time.